You
want to drive? Or?
Either way, if you're more comfortable driving, go for it.
Well, let's see how it goes. Can you hear me okay?
I don't think it's not on.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Speech major. This is meant partly as a provocation, if not for this audience, then for the audience of professors. I am going to speak louder. Maybe I will use it. This is meant as a provocation. Is that better? Okay. This is meant as a provocation, if not for this audience, then for the indirect audience of professors with whom I will be sharing this presentation. And the title especially is meant to be a provocation. The idea is not that social media have influenced academia, but that social media are, at least a slice of social media, are in fact academia. And so I'm going to get into what I mean by that. But the basic point is that social media has become, social practices have always been infused in academia throughout many aspects of the way courses are run, the way students are graded, the way students are, receive their recommendations and then go out into the world to get jobs, those of whom who do that, and so on and so forth. And social media is just another set of communication channels. And so really you should think of social media as the ground in which academic practices can take place. And this thought is actually pretty provocative, controversial, and even objectionable for many of the professors I've talked with, especially in the communication disciplines from where I hail. And the reason for that is because their cultural lineage says that social media are really, they're not the type of thing that a university should engage in, especially a university professor. And so professors are used to, this may be a bit unfair for me to say, but I know I'm generalizing. Professors are used to a certain standing that they tend to lose in social media. And so what I'm going to be describing is the changes in power relations that I think are taking place in academia as professors and adjuncts, as I was at the University of Texas, and full professors move online and become part of the social media landscape, in which they are only a small part. Now, what I'm going to do to accomplish this, or try to accomplish this, is look at 4 domains and just very briefly touch on 4 areas or sub-institutions within an overall academic setting where I think this transition is taking place. And some of these social media showed up early, and they've fundamentally changed the nature of the institution itself. Libraries are a good example, and that's what this graphic is really talking about. The nature of the library changes when the information is available essentially worldwide. And the purpose of the university at that point is to communicate knowledge outward rather than simply to have only their students learn the information. So I'll be giving you a couple examples. MIT, for example, where the entire curriculum is available online for free for anyone who can access it via the internet on the world. In fact, there are a few projects that will print out and send the MIT curriculum to places in the world that aren't online. And they'll do it for free to fulfill that purpose of reaching out, from taking what was in the library or what was in the classroom and what was closed off from anyone other than those who pay tuition or get loans or scholarships to be able to have that information. And I think that's a fundamental change, and it changes the nature of the library. It's been a tremendous competitive threat for that part of the academy, the library. The fact that information flows so freely. We see this with examples like the Google Books projects as a perfect example of this, or the popularization of essentially student-run courses where people take notes and then they share those notes prolifically, notes that are much better than the class notes professors often share. A second example of a sub-institution within academy. This is the Blanton Museum at University of Texas, which has undergone tremendous changes, and this is true of university collections worldwide, but especially in the United States and in Europe, where their collections have gone online and actually get a greater number of visitors online than they get face-to-face. And the amount of information that's probably communicated is much greater than could possibly take place through a face-to-face setting where you have to pay your membership and walk into the building. This is true not only for university museums, it's true for museums generally. The Louvre is a perfect example where many more people view the works of art on the Louvre via the internet, via collections that are available, for example, on your iPhone or your iPad or other computing device than would ever actually visit that institution. A third example is the creative arts. And this is another exhibit from the Blanton. Some of you may recognize it. And what I'm really describing here is a change where the students actually, in some respects, have more power than many of the professors, at least that I've observed, because their new media skills are so much more powerful, so much newer, so much fresher than what the professors have available to them. And so that changes the nature of the academic relationship, particularly in communication disciplines, where the purpose is to teach people how to reach an audience. And then the fourth is the classroom. What this is showing is basically, just for privacy reasons, I've changed the photograph a little bit, but this is a person wearing a 3D glasses in a classroom to watch a 3D presentation that's available both in person and online. And so the professor's actually giving this 3D demonstration. And what I'm really trying to point out here is that many of our assumptions, our historical assumptions about the classroom setting being face-to-face and online teaching being remote, those categories are becoming increasingly suspect. The categories are blurred. The reason for that is so much of the classroom environment now has cheap camcorders available, audio recorded by students where the entire lecture is made available online, unbeknownst to the professors. The course notes are available in video form, and so on and so forth. This changes the nature of face-to-face interaction versus this assumption that remote learning is not as good as face-to-face learning. And in that sense, it changes the relationship between the teacher and the students, because now the students don't actually have to go to class to learn. They can learn as much from their fellow students as they can from the professor, particularly where they're doing something like a research project, or they're building something, they're making something, and the teacher is simply imparting a little bit of knowledge that enables them to create. And that, to me, is a fundamental shift from what we've seen in the past. And it's a fundamental shift that's enabled by technology. What would happen to our major universities in the United States or throughout the world if we held classes or we held rituals like a graduation ceremony and nobody came? Would that mean that people would stop learning? Would that mean that people would no longer take on a set of professional skills? Would that mean that teachers would no longer teach? I don't think that that is the case. What would just happen is that some of our normal modes of communication via face-to-face interaction, small-scale teaching in a classroom setting or a mentoring session may, in some cases, continue, but they're not the main point. Just like this setting today, we're both having a face-to-face interaction and we're streaming live via the internet. And it's not clear at this point where the learning is going to go around the world. And maybe that's a good thing. It changes the nature of the relationship in one other way, in that the students now have a choice, and their choice is basically to opt out. I'm going to tell you a story about, I was at the South by Southwest conference a couple months ago, and Ev Williams was there. Ev Williams, if you don't know, is one of the founders of Twitter, a rock star. People waited 4 hours, 2 to 4 hours in line to go to that session. And he was interviewed on stage, and it became really quickly apparent as this interview was happening in front of about 6,000 people. People started trickling out, and then the trickle became a flood, and by the end of it, more than 80% of the audience had actually left. And now that's not an academic setting. However, the same kind of phenomenon is happening in academia. We see it in the way professors are rated. We see it in the way they are described in Twitter, Facebook, and any number of other sources. We see it in their class enrollments. And we have to acknowledge that it does change things quite a bit, the power dynamic, in that the students have a choice they didn't have in the past. So I don't think it's safe to say that just because people don't show up face-to-face means that the learning in academia ceases to exist. So for me, the question is, for universities, what time is it? What time is it?